This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
I was trying to get it how I live. I want them dead presidents. I want to pull up, head spin, get flat. I got 6 jobs. I don't get tired. I don't get tired.
And we are still not tired on Two Bad Hombres. I am your host, Vito Jerome Churko, alongside my usual sidekick and partner in crime. That is the Doc from Doc and Jock, John Charles Macaroon. And we have an in-studio guest in Jacob Hirschman, who's been in the studio before to talk about the stickmen of the basketball tournament. And he is here this week to talk about Hurricane Irma a little bit and how it's affected him. And, well, he's back in Michigan because of it, too. And with that being said, let's introduce Jake Hirschman. Jake, how's it going?
It's going well. Good to be here. Good to be safe out of the hurricane. I am happy to be here. Like I said, my second time, so it's an honor.
And we talked about the stickmen in the basketball tournament and how that all, well, was going to go for you guys. Now, how did it actually go?
So our first game, we actually played the Air Force alumni, and we destroyed them by like 40 points. It was my first win ever in TBT. It was super fun, super exciting. Our team played great. Then our best player, Lua Munson, who played for the Knicks for a long time in the NBA, actually had to leave to go play in the Big Three. We ended up playing this Team Challenge ALS that was coached by Darren Collison, point guard for the Pacers. And they beat us by about 10, and that team actually ended up going to the finals and losing to the back-to-back-to-back champs, Overseas Elite.
Wow.
Yeah.
So at least you got a win, though.
Yeah, we finally got a win. Finally.
Yeah.
It felt really good to put that Stickman name up on the bracket. It was so awesome. Such a great experience. Out in Vegas for my first time, so it was really fun.
That was key for you, getting that win, and that's always fun in Vegas.
Oh, yeah,
obviously,
it was awesome. It was very, very hot, but it was super fun.
Besides the stickman, what else did you partake in Vegas? Your first time, obviously, you want to get about, maybe go by the pools, maybe visit a couple of the casinos. What did you partake in Las Vegas?
I mean, we obviously walked the strip. We're walking around. Actually saw Denzel Valentine there walking around the strip. Obviously went swimming. It was hard not to when it was 110 degrees every day. But a lot of it was hanging out with the team, and then the other big part was going to Summer League. I was super pumped, something I'd always wanted to do, and it just kind of worked out where TBT was at the same time as the Summer League. So we went to about 3 or 4 games, got to see Lonzo Ball, put up a triple-double, so that was super fun.
So you were impressed by Lonzo Ball then, because there's so much out there about him right now and negative stuff because of his dad, LeVar Ball, but his play on the court is very great, and I think everybody is saying that right now, Jake.
Yeah, definitely. It's not just the fact that he's a good shooter or anything like that, because he's not the best shooter in the world, but he just sees the court so well. He had like 11 assists the game that I went to, and he's going to make a big difference for that team, probably be the starting point guard from day one, and if the Lakers end up getting LeBron or Paul George next year, he could really be a generational player.
Who else impressed you during Summer League, by the way, that you got the chance to see up close and personal?
Forbes, actually, the Michigan State guy from the San Antonio Spurs, was putting up 30 points every game. We got to see him play one game. I think he dropped 32 the game we went to, and he's got a pure stroke. He's going to get some minutes on that team, not a lot, but for a team like the Spurs, that's going to be a championship contender. That's good for a young guy like that.
And now, Jake, supposedly, I know you're all in about it. It's about the LeBron James rumor going to L.A., and now that Kyrie's been traded, IT is there from the Celtics, a different kind of roster for the Cavs. Jay Crowder as well, as a result of that trade that traded Kyrie Irving to the Celtics. And it looks more and more like he is going to leave the Cavaliers at the end of the season. What do you think about that?
Personally, I think he's going to leave, just as everyone else really does. And I think the Cavs are prepared for that. I think when they made that trade, a big thing for them was getting that Brooklyn Nets coveted number 1 pick, so that if LeBron leaves, and Isaiah Thomas leaves because he's an expiring contract as well, they can build around that number 1 pick, whoever it is, be it Michael Porter from Missouri or somebody else. They're preparing themselves for the future, because if LeBron leaves, they're not going to win the East again. Their reign's probably going to be over. It's going to be the Celtics' turn, but they're going to be in a good position with a potential generational player, maybe not as good as LeBron, but maybe another Kyrie, and that puts them in a good position in an Eastern Conference that's actually pretty weak.
And now, how about the Celtics? Right now this season, but going into the future too. And I guess first and foremost, start with this season and what you expect from the Celtics. Yeah,
so the Celtics should compete for the Eastern Conference crown. I still think at the end of the day, as long as the Cavaliers have LeBron James, the Cavs are going to win the East. And until that changes, I'm going to be picking the Cavs every single year. But if LeBron leaves, the Celtics are set up to basically dominate the East the way the Cavs have. They're going to re-sign Kyrie most likely. like I said, they still have a lot of good players in Al Horford. They just signed Gordon Hayward as well. They have young guys in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. So they're really set up to kind of dominate this conference going forward. And they got a young, good coach in Brad Stevens, who a lot of people say might be the best mind in the league right now next to a Greg Popovich.
Now, how about our Detroit Pistons moving into a new arena in Little Caesars Arena in downtown Detroit? And more importantly, they've added Avery Bradley, formerly of the Beantown Celtics, and he's a good two-way player, great perimeter defender, but what does he really bring to the Pistons this season, in your opinion, Jake?
Yeah, so I'm really excited for the Pistons. They're my number one team in Detroit, and I think just by kind of adding Avery Bradley and doing not much else, they should make the playoffs this year. Obviously, disappointing season last year, but if Reggie Jackson can come back, stay healthy, play better. And Avery Bradley, I think, is an upgrade over KCP. KCP was a guy a lot of people liked, but he wasn't worth the $25 million price tag he was looking for. Decent shooter, pretty good defender, but I think everything he does is just not as good as what Avery Bradley did basically for the Celtics. Bradley is more experienced. He's going to be cheaper, just as good a defender. I think a more consistent shooter. He's going to come in, might be our leading scorer from day one.
And then Bradley, now I might be wrong here, but he hit a game-winning shot against the Cavaliers, right?
Yep, in the playoffs.
And that was a one game they won.
That is correct.
So, I mean, he's got something going for him in that respect. And now KCP going to L.A. on a one-year deal, a big one-year deal, and he has the ability to now perform well under the bright lights of Los Angeles, and, I mean, maybe he gets a big deal because of that. But anyways, the Pistons again, Andre Drummond now. And now we've talked about him before, obviously, but I see in all these different Pistons promos about them moving into the LCA and trying to get the fans hyped that he wants to prove all the doubters wrong, which I think enormously is about his lack of free throw ability, free throw shooting ability, which has really gotten the best of him for a long time now. His struggles are at the charity stripe. Now, do you think he's going to become a better all-around player this upcoming season?
I mean, that's what you got to hope. If you follow him on Instagram or Twitter or Snapchat or anything like that, you see he's in better shape and working out all summer, doing all this stuff. But the one thing you're not really seeing is the free throw shooting. And that's the biggest thing. He's a good rebounder, decent defender, still needs to work on his post moves. But if he's going to shoot 30% from the free throw line, you're just not going to be able to play him in crunch time. And if your best player isn't playing in crunch time, how good of a team can you really be? So, I mean, honestly, if he could just get up to over 50%.
I mean, nice, or like 45%, right, at the charity stripe. That'd be
so
great.
Much better.
Yeah.
So much better. But in terms of everything else, one of the best rebounders in the league, if not the best rebounder. And if he can work on those post moves a little more, get down in the post, score down there, he could legitimately be close to a 20-20 guy.
But if you can't have him on the floor in crunch time like you were already referencing, Jake, I mean, how is he even your best player? He's not worth that max contract that they gave to him then if he can't be on the floor down the stretch late in games. When you need your best, if he's your best player, you need your best player on the floor at that point.
Yeah, I understand. It's incredibly frustrating. That's why last year, I was pushing for us to, try to get a king's ransom, trade him for a Boogie Cousins, CJ McCollum, something like that. Obviously, it didn't happen, but, if he starts going off and putting up 20-20 games, but his free throw shooting is still horrible, we might be able to flip him for a premier guard or even another premier big man like a Boogie Cousins. But, we'll see. Stan Van, obviously, is frustrated with him. He's said before that nobody on the team is untouchable. So a lot of guys need to step up. As you said, Drummond, we need to see Reggie Jackson healthy. Bradley needs to come in, fit right away. And Stanley Johnson might be starting, so we got to see if he improves as well.
Some guys have to step it up. And Reggie Jackson has to be better than last year as well. Him and Drummond most notably, but these other young players, maybe under-the-radar guys, have to step up and become better contributors consistently this season because their roles are going to be bigger, and Stan Van Gundy's going to expect more of those guys. So we'll see what the Pistons can do. Now, the reason why you're here, though, is because of Hurricane Irma. So now you had to leave Miami. You go to Miami, Florida, the law school at Miami, Florida. So when did you actually come back to Michigan because of the hurricane?
Yes.
Describe that.
So that was a couple weekends ago when the Hurricane Irma started forming out in the Atlantic. And it's funny, you talk to South Floridians, people who've lived in Miami their whole lives, and they're telling you, don't worry about it. If I had a nickel for every time someone told me a hurricane was going to hit, I'd have like $10. This never happens. That was, Saturday, Sunday, we're talking about it with classmates. By Tuesday, we get a text saying classes are canceled for at least the rest of the week, and people are telling us to get out. This is going to be bad. I tried to get a flight out of Miami, but it was like $800. So I ended up booking a flight out of Orlando for much, much cheaper. Drove up to Orlando Tuesday night, flew out of Orlando Wednesday morning, and I've been home ever since.
And I know Orlando got it bad. Now, not as bad as as Key West and Naples on last Sunday, but on Monday it hit Orlando. Yep. and a large portion of Central Florida, but it was relegated to a tropical storm at that point
Correct.
on Monday morning. So wasn't as severe, Doc, but still most of Florida was hit and was devastated by Hurricane Irma.
Man, Vito, it's one of those things where when you start looking at it, natural disasters happen with the weather and things like that. And look, it uproots people's lives. Jacob's now here in Michigan. He's supposed to start school, and his life has been uprooted. And so when you look at natural disasters, it's very fascinating when, the psychology of it, when there's warnings, there's, people saying, get out. And yet people still battle that notion of, look, there's been several times where they've given us notices and we don't believe it. But this one was severe. But before we get into, how this has displaced you and what's some of the challenges has been, what was it like in Miami? Did you have a good time your first go-around down there?
Yeah, so I was down there for about 3 weeks before I had to evacuate.
It is like the town people say it is.
Yeah, when everyone's asking me, how is it? It's amazing. I love living down there. Every day I throw on shorts, a t-shirt, and flip-flops, go to class. It's 90 degrees every single day. I came back up here, and it was like 65, and I got a cold immediately just because I wasn't used to the weather. Like, I have no sweatshirts down there. I have like 2 pairs of sweatpants, and I haven't worn them. It's just beautiful all the time. It'll rain every day for about 10 minutes, but other than that, it's paradise.
I don't know if you're aware, but Vito is a VIP down there at Fontainebleau, and he goes down there and he parties and he has a good old time. And
I think we talked to him about
I've
it.
heard about that.
Remember?
Yeah. So did you get it to partake in some of the nightlife? I hear that you can basically stay up till 5 a.m. having a good old time, enjoying the nightlife in downtown Miami or South Beach.
Yeah, so I went out for the Mayweather-McGregor fight. Went to this Irish pub. Super fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Irish pub, so they were rooting for Conor McGregor.
Oh,
big
really
time.
hard. Yeah, they were singing the Irish national anthem. It was super fun. But after we went out to this place in Brickell, which is a part of downtown Miami, and it's like 2:30, and just more people are filing into the club. And the next weekend I go, and it's like 11 p.m., and which is like, you're getting to the nightlife, and it's like empty. There's like nobody there. It doesn't start getting crazy till like 1, 2 in the morning. It's just, it's a lot different than up here.
Because the bars and clubs over there now, I've been to Miami, obviously. I already, Doc has referenced that. But I think they are open until 4 or 5 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
Something like that. And you can have the drinks in the streets, from what I remember, too.
Yeah.
So you don't get arrested or anything. You don't get in trouble. Because I know, obviously, in Michigan and maybe everywhere else in the U.S., you can't walk around with your drink in your hand, an alcoholic beverage in your hand, because you're going to get, arrested, right, by the cops. So not in Miami.
No,
different story.
It's very, very different down there. Like I said, stuff starts later.
Yeah.
Stuff stays open later. There's some clubs that are legitimately just 24/7. So there's people out till 5, 6 in the morning. That's a little much for me, but it's super fun. I love it.
And now, really quick, I know we're having a fun conversation, but back to the hurricanes. Hurricane Harvey hit Houston big time. Hurricane Irma hit Florida, obviously, the whole entire state big time. Mm-hmm. Now, this was the first time on record in U.S. history that there's been 2 hurricanes that have had landfall and have been Category 4 hurricanes when they've hit. Mm-hmm. So that is something, and I guess it leads to the discussion about global warming, too, right? A little bit about how there's some truth. There's some validity to global warming. I think, Jake. Not that we're going to now cover that. We're not global warming experts, but I think that tells you that there is some validity to global warming.
Yeah, it's, they said after Hurricane Irma hit Cuba, it had gone down to a Category 3, but because of the warm water by Florida, it basically got Hurricane Irma back up to Category 4 before it blasted the Keys and hit Naples and Tampa and kind of, swirled around and hit the rest of Florida. So there's definitely something to it, but it's, Miami, we got a little lucky because we didn't get hit directly as they thought we might, but still flooding, power lines down, trees down, lots of power outages, almost statewide power outages that they're still working on getting back together. It's a crazy time.
Did you have a plan B? Let's say that you could not take a flight out of Orlando. Let's say that maybe there was some weather delays or something happened. Did you have a contingency plan to maybe drive up or to maybe even drive up further to Atlanta or get out from a different angle?
Yeah, so a lot of people I know drove to Atlanta. That's kind of the place to go when there's a hurricane. My girlfriend's sister actually lives in Charlotte, so my plan B was to just drive 11 hours to Charlotte and just kind of hunker up there until I could get out. So I had a plan B. My plan C, I guess, was just kind of hunker down in my apartment, but I didn't want to do that. So, like I said, right when they canceled classes, I just decided to get out. When I left, it was 90 and sunny. When I go back, it'll be 90 and sunny. So, luckily, I will not have had to deal with any of the really bad stuff.
But you almost said that you stayed in your apartment and you bought all the water. You were all ready to go in case you had to stay.
Yeah, I bought. Right in my fridge right now, still there is a ton of water, jugs and jugs and gallons of water.
Will it still be good, I wonder?
The water will be good, but I bought milk, bread.
You got to get rid of that, right?
Yeah, I bought it, and the next day I decided to leave, so I had to throw everything out. After they canceled classes, went back to my apartment, threw out everything I knew would spoil, grabbed my books and my laptop, and I just left all my clothes, TV, everything else I just left there. I'm like, if this gets ruined, it gets ruined. There's nothing I can do.
And now this podcast is recorded earlier in the week, but drops on Saturdays. So now, moving past Saturday, when do you expect to actually move back?
Yeah, so they will start classes up again on Wednesday. So I will have missed 2 full weeks of school. They haven't told us exactly how they plan to make up those classes, but I plan to fly back Tuesday morning to Orlando, then I'll drive from Orlando to Miami. I could have flown back earlier this weekend, and I kind of thought about that, but I wanted to be in Detroit to celebrate Monday Night Football with the city. So,
are you really celebrating Monday Night Football?
Yeah, I am.
I see you got the Lions hat on, so I guess you are.
I'm going to watch it. I think we can beat the Giants. So,
well, I thought they could beat the Cardinals, and they did too. I know. Well, somebody here maybe didn't expect or didn't have as high of expectations for it. I just had more high expectations, and I think you saw Carson Palmer. Not to get into a Lions-Cardinals discussion now, but recapping that just a bit, the Lions were the better team. They didn't play the best first half, but Carson Palmer, back to him really quick. He looks like an aging vet who's aging really quick and isn't nearly the same caliber of a quarterback that he was even last year, 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I was very surprised by our defense. As you said, Carson Palmer looked kind of washed.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of how Eli looked in the last week's Sunday night game against the Cowboys, so that gives me some confidence going into that game. Obviously, no Odell Beckham possibly as well.
Yeah.
But in terms of the Cardinals, our defense looked great. We shut down David Johnson. Obviously, he dislocated his wrist. Sucks for him and a lot of fantasy owners out there. But, it was an impressive game after that horrible first quarter, as you said.
Luckily, I didn't have the number 1 pick because I would have taken David Johnson. Now I don't have to worry about that. And now OBJ, people might have taken him number 2. He's out for this week and maybe even a month. They're saying that there's no even set timetable, which is crazy when you got a high-profile player that the Giants rely on so heavily for their offensive attack, too.
Yeah, without him, they really don't have anything.
It showed, right, last week?
Yeah, they looked horrible. Brandon Marshall, who was kind of their big free agent signing, had 1 catch, and it was with about a minute left in the game. They have a second-year guy, Sterling Shepard, a decent receiver, but they just don't have anything. They don't have a running game, so they can't set up the pass. It's not a good look for the Giants. They have a pretty good defense, so that might be able to kind of shut down the Lions a little bit, but I thought the Cardinals had a good defense, and we looked great against them.
Hey, speaking of the NFL, how bad is Thursday Night Football?
I tried to watch that game last night, and I ended up falling asleep. The Bengals haven't scored a touchdown in 2 games. The Texans looked horrible. Other than Deshaun Watson's 150-yard touchdown run, it was a crap game.
It was a craptastic game. And are we going to get any good Thursday Night Football games this year, Doc?
Dude, you see what's on tap for next week? Oh, my gosh, it's horrible.
It's 49ers-Rams, right?
Yeah,
Which, God, those are 2 bad teams. Now, Jared Goff looked really good in week 1.
Yeah, the Colts are horrible, though.
Colts, yeah, God. Their quarterback situation right now, no Andrew Luck for how long? There's another situation. I don't get it. In modern-day professional sports, they don't know the timetable for these guys. And I think it's more of, the Jim Caldwell way of doing things, which you don't reveal anything to the media, which I hate, by the way, and a lot of people hate him because of that, too, Jake.
Yeah, no, I know a lot of people kind of don't like Caldwell because he doesn't show any emotion, doesn't tell you anything, but at the end of the day, if we're winning games, I'm not going to be too upset.
So you don't think now, if they have a bad season, they go 5-11 or 6-10, is his job really, really on the hot seat?
I think so. I think Bob Quinn, who has been fairly impressive during his few years in Detroit, even when we missed the playoffs 2 years ago, he was considering letting Caldwell go, ended up keeping him. Players like him a lot, and we made the playoffs. So, I think pretty much anywhere you don't make the playoffs, that you have to kind of evaluate, do you want to keep your coach, especially when he may not be making that big of a difference. Caldwell's more of a game manager, like we've been saying, doesn't show much emotion.
No, not at all.
But if we're winning games at the end of the day, I'll be happy.
And now the thing is, if they make the playoffs, going 9-7, get a wild card spot, which I think is the best case scenario for the Lions at this point, just like last season, does that save his job for next year, in your opinion?
I'd assume so. Last year we backed in the playoffs, but a lot of that I think had to do with the fact that Stafford was a little banged up.
Yeah.
Obviously hurt his finger, and we lost those last 4 games. Still made the playoffs. Didn't look great against the Seahawks, but we started out great. And if we start out that way this year, if we beat the Giants, start out 2-0, like I said, I don't think we can win the division because of the Packers, but we could be a good wild card team. And if Stafford's healthy, I think we could make a little run.
Well, now, I think Sports Illustrated ranked Matt Stafford number 9 among the quarterbacks in the NFL in their preseason edition about the NFL. And they put the Lions at 5-11, though, and he's the number 9 quarterback in the NFL. That doesn't really add up, right?
No, yeah, that doesn't really make sense. Usually, your team's as good as your quarterback is. And I know a lot of people were kind of low on the Lions going into this year. A lot of people ripping on Stafford, saying he's not worth the big money. But him, Alex Smith, and Sam Bradford probably are the 3 best week ones of all the quarterbacks. And I mean, Sam Bradford, Alex Smith, Stafford, a lot of these guys were getting ripped on going into the season, but you just don't know. And, when Stafford's healthy, I legitimately think he's a top 10 quarterback. He's worth that money. And what I think a lot of people don't realize is if we don't have Stafford, we're starting a Jake Rudock, and we're going to win 2 games. When you have a quarterback like Stafford, you don't let him up. You don't think the Browns would be paying Stafford $200 million if they could? That's just how it is. When we have Stafford, we have to enjoy him for as long as we can.
But Jake, you love the Wolverines.
I do.
You got your man Jake Rudock there as a backup. He can, make him the starter, right? He's a former Wolverine. He can do it. Obviously.
I loved Rudock at Michigan. He was a great Michigan quarterback. I wish we had him at Michigan now instead of Wilton Spate. But he's no more than a backup. I know that there were some rumors before the season that we were getting some trade interest from Rudock, and I was like, hey, I love Rudock, but flip him. If we can get a pick for this guy, he's no more than a backup. And if Stafford goes down, we're going to be bad anyways. So I like Rudock. It's cool that he's on the Lions, but if he were to start for us, we'd be a mess.
I think so too. And it's also about, with Stafford and that discussion, it's what's the alternative? I don't think it's a great alternative, and we could talk about that all day long. We've already talked about it big time on this podcast, Doc, as you know. But really quick for you now, how excited are you to get back to Florida?
Yeah, I'm excited to get there, to just kind of get back in the swing of things. I was in a good routine in terms of going to class, coming back, studying, going to work out, go outside, enjoy the sun. And now I come back, I don't have anything to do. Our teachers didn't give us assignments because we didn't know when we were going to come back. So it'll just be good to get back in the swing of things.
So Jacob, are you a Floridian? Because of the fact now you're going to be going to school there, you've now been acclimated, to the life in Miami. It's obviously a little bit different than living in Detroit. Post-school, have you given some thought to maybe becoming a full-time Floridian?
I'm not opposed to it. I don't know what I'm going to do. Part of choosing Miami was the fact that I could see myself staying down there. I don't consider myself a Floridian yet. I consider myself a Michigander still, but that could change. We'll see.
And how tough has it been so far, by the way, with the classes? You said you had 3 weeks of classes before the hurricane hit?
Yeah. It's a lot of reading, but, it's not too bad. You just got to kind of know what you can do, lock down, focus. There's no really assignments because everything comes down to the last final. Which is, a little stressful, but in the meantime, you just know you got to read the stuff. You're going to go over it in class. You have time to kind of digest and understand the material, so there's not as much pressure as people may think.
But it's different than undergrad studies,
much
right?
different. Yeah, it's not like you have worksheets or essays or anything like that. Literally, you're just reading, briefing cases, going over them in class over and over and over again.
Well, I wish you the best of luck, Jake, and I think it takes a smart man to encounter some of the studies that you are now and courses and just expectations. Expectations are high.
Oh, yeah.
And when you go to law school, the expectations are always, I would say, sky high, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, everyone expects, are you going to be this big corporate lawyer? Are you going to become the biggest agent in the game? What are you going to do? And I'm like, I'm 3 weeks into law school. Just, hey, chill a little bit. Let me get my grasp on everything, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, relax a little bit, everybody, right?
Exactly.
And let's just see how everything plays out, and I think it will well for you. Now, we can talk much more with Jake, and we will after this commercial break, but wanted to let you guys know, joining us after this quick commercial break will be Isaiah Hole of 24/7 Sports. He covers the Michigan Wolverines for 24/7.
Coming up right after this.
Yeah, we coming now.
And now, joining me on this week's edition of Two Bad Hombres is University of Michigan alum Isaiah Hole of 24/7 Sports. Isaiah, how's it going?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Vito. Really, really good to be on. Obviously, it's good to see a team with 2-0 and everything, so that's it's exciting.
Well, it's always a great thing when that's the case for Michigan football. Everything is going right, you would think, but there is that controversy surrounding the quarterback Wilton Spate and whether or not there is a better alternative to him at QB for the Wolverines this season. And now Harbaugh has clearly said that he is Michigan's starter right now. But what is your take on all that drama regarding the quarterback situation at U of M?
Well, I've been a vehement defender of Spate. I think that he is the best option Michigan has as of right now. That's not to say that some of those guys, those younger guys like Brandon Peters and true freshman Dylan McCaffrey, can't be better quarterbacks eventually, but Spate gives Michigan the best chance to win right now. Yeah, there's a couple things that you want to see him fix. He admitted to it a little bit himself after the Cincinnati game about his footwork, that he's kind of rushing himself into throws and he's not setting his feet. But when the team went back and looked at the tapes and everything from this past week, a source close to the program had told me that they really only saw two overthrows that they were disappointed in. Other than that, it was 17 for 29, 221 yards, touchdown, two pair of touchdowns there. So it's not like he was terrible. So you'd think that the fan base thought that he was really, really failing and that the team couldn't do anything because of him. It's not the case. It just is kind of blown up because he's the face of this team right now. And it's a young team. It's going to take a minute for everything to coalesce. It's going to take a bit for these young wide receivers to get going, even just true sophomore Kakilla Crawford going, because the guy only had 2 catches last year. Yeah, he saw his fair share of playing time, but it's not like they're trotting out Amara Darbo and Jehu Chesson like they were a year ago, where those guys had 4 years under their belt at that point. So it's going to take a minute for everything to kind of work. And I think people have been a little bit impatient. I don't think a lot of fans give him the slide that they should for the sake of having the injury that he sustained against Iowa. And they unfortunately just see Ohio State and Florida State, those 2 losses, as his fault, even though he was a big reason why they were in those games. And really, honestly, you can't win football games when you run for 2 yards per carry. And to me, that was the bigger reason why they lost those games. So I definitely am a defender of what Spate brings to the table. I think he will get things corrected. He's making the right decisions if you look at everything that he's doing. And that's the most important thing, in my opinion. He's not making bad decisions with the football, and he's making overthrows. And that's a problem in itself, but at least he's targeting the right guy. He's not doing both. He's not making bad decisions and overthrowing. He's at least got 75% of the equation down. Now he just needs to settle down and get the football to his targets, and he'll be fine.
And Isaiah, as you know, too, it's about winning football games at the end of the day for quarterbacks, and he's won a lot more games than he's lost so far as Michigan starting QB. And it seems like he has a very solid ground game to support him as well. The number 1 back right now is fifth-year senior Ty Isaac. He ran for a career-high 133 yards in Week 2 versus Cincy, a $114 versus Florida in Week 1. So he's been very solid so far, hasn't found the end zone, but I've got to believe he is due to find the end zone, might as well do that in Week 3 versus Air Force.
Yeah, we'll see. Air Force is pretty stout against the run. That's something that they've historically been. Granted, they're bringing in a ton of new starters, much like Michigan, but these guys are a little bit older for the most part, and they're too deep. But they're unseasoned. But they've historically had a pretty stout run defense. But Ty Isaac's been a heck of a good surprise. I kind of wondered if this is what we were going to see this year when we got to the spring game, and he only came in for like a handful of plays and then he sat out for the rest. To me, that told me that Michigan saw everything they needed to see from him. I mean, he's a career 6 yards per carry guy. I just think that he just never got that opportunity because it seemed like a lot of times, like look at that Iowa game. Came in, ran a 9-yard touchdown, never saw him again. It's just kind of been the par for the course for Isaac. So yeah, not surprised that he's having a good year, but obviously he wants to find the end zone, but they've seemed pretty intent for the most part to try to get there through the air. Karan Higdon getting the ball on the ground in game 1. It's I think they've got such a great rotation too. I'd love to see more of what Chris Evans is going to do, especially kind of in an H-back type role. I'm wondering if they have that planned for him. Higdon's great. And I just wonder also, when are we going to see Kareem Walker? He's been a bit banged up, but the rushing game, it's got a lot of moving parts that can do quite some good things. They've obviously done it so far the first two weeks, fueled by Ty Isaac.
And it was so perplexing to me, Isaiah, at times when you look at sophomore Chris Evans, junior Karan Higdon, how Harbaugh has handled this running back committee. And, Evans and Higdon combined for 9 carries and 28 rushing yards versus Cincy. And you know what? My question for you right now, Isaiah, is do you see their roles expanding as the season does progress?
Oh, absolutely. The way I'm kind of looking at things right now is it's kind of, even though that they opened with a big opponent in Florida, to me it feels like they're doing the same type of thing that they would do any given year. And part of that might be because of youth. But I feel like they're kind of easing into their offense. Got to keep in mind, Pep Hamilton is a first-year pass game coordinator. Jay Harbaugh's first-year running backs coach. They have different methods and things that they want to do, but it's going to take a minute for, you have to get that base level knowledge in before you get to the next level. And you also don't want to show, all your cards before you get to like a Michigan State game in week 6. So I think that you'll see more both Higdon and Evans. And then, we saw Omari Samuels get a run last week. I'm sure we'll see more of him since they decided to go ahead and burn his red shirt. Sure, we'll see Kareem Walker when he's healthy. I think that they'll be a lot more involved, and you'll see a lot more nuance in the run game going forward when they start to be able to keep in mind also Greg Fry, first-year tackles coach. You obviously already have Tim Drevno already in place. So I think once you get moved down further into the schedule, you'll see more wrinkles added. That's one of the things that Michigan's done really well in the first 2 years, and it's kind of an NFL mentality. They make it impossible for other teams to prepare for their offense because they have such a deep playbook. They've been relatively vanilla so far. So I would anticipate that you're going to see a lot of different things. What I really want to see is Chris Evans more involved in the passing game, particularly because when he came to Michigan, something that my colleague Steve Lorenz pointed out on our podcast yesterday, when he came to Michigan, they didn't know if they were going to play him at wide receiver, if they were going to play him at running back, or even on the defensive side of the ball as either a safety or a cornerback. But they just knew that they needed to get him out on the field as soon as possible, as quickly as possible. And they really wanted to get the ball into his hands on the offensive side of the ball. Well, that ended up resulting in him being the running back. So, but he could catch the ball too. So I would not be surprised to see him get the ball in space as we go forward, probably a little bit more going forward into the schedule. Like I said, Michigan State type week or Penn State, because much like when they brought in Jabril Peppers in 2015 on the offensive side of the ball, think about if you have a very productive Ty Isaac in the backfield and Chris Evans split out wide, or, them running a kind of more of a wishbone type look. I don't know that that's necessarily in their repertoire, but it's something that they could do with the personnel that they have.
Isaiah Hull of 24/7 Sports, lending some fresh feedback on this week's edition of Two Bad Hombres. And you know what? You look at the secondary, had a lot of questions, the U of M secondary did entering the season. How do you think it has meshed so far?
Well, it's been pretty phenomenal, I think. I mean, it's hard to not like what they've done in the secondary. 4 new starters. We already had a really good idea of what Tyree Kittle was going to bring to the table. But we hadn't seen it yet. He had been in games a bit. We'd seen a little bit of his speed against Cincinnati. We got a full dose of what Tyree Kittle can do. Other safety position, Josh Metellus, obviously he came in to replace Jabril Peppers in the bowl game, but that was at Viper. The thing that I find really interesting about Metellus coming in and being the kind of force player he's been, I think he's got a shot of being like an all Big Ten caliber type safety if he continues to play the way he's been playing. Is that when he committed to Michigan, he was a 2-star at the time, at least according to our site, I believe, across the board. And a lot of Michigan fans saw picking Metellus as something of a ploy to try to get Devin Bush, who himself was only a 3-star, kind of a tweener, 3-4 star. And now in only his second year, this guy that was considered a 2-star at the time of his commitment, eventually bumped up to a solid 3-star, is one of the most solid players on the defensive side of the ball. It's pretty amazing. On the back end, it's been a 3-headed monster, obviously. They've really liked what Lavert Hill has been able to do. He was a guy that they really wanted to challenge a bit. With him, it's all mental. That's something that his high school coaches have always said. I've heard quite a bit. Some of his high school coaches had told me that they thought he was going to be better than Jordan Lewis once his career was said and done. Keep in mind that they both went to Cass Tech. Lavert Hill, for the people that are going to scream, he went to Detroit King. He was at Cass Tech before he transferred to King and during his senior year. So they had some of the same coaches, and they had told me that they thought that he had a chance to be as good, if not better, than JD. That's something that both Harbaugh and Jordan Lewis himself have said that they think that that's a possibility. And, it's only his true sophomore season, and he's been at the hip of some of these wide receivers. So that's been impressive. Who's really impressed me has been Brandon Watson, kind of a forgotten man, guy who, committed forever ago, hadn't really seen much playing time, and when he did, it wasn't really that stellar. He's splitting time with David Long, he was a guy that I've been really high on since he was in high school. But Watson's come in. He's got 3 pass breakups so far on the year. We've seen a couple times when the receiver's been able to get by him, and he's been able to catch up to him and bat the ball away. So that's definitely not something I would have expected from him. I would have expected it more from those other 2 guys, or even true freshman Ambry Thomas, who himself is going to be a superstar. I think he's a guy that could be better than all of them when it's all said and done. Just he's got the whole package. So they're in a great position. Want to see more of what they're doing going forward. Just considering, 2 games do not equal a season. I think they'll have a good week this week against Air Force because they're going to want to run the ball more than they're going to pass. But it's very promising considering that was one of the 2 biggest question marks for this team heading into the season.
Yeah, you touched on it very briefly, Isaiah, but how do you think this team is going to handle the triple option of Air Force? It's something a lot of them surely haven't seen, and even Harbaugh himself has said he hasn't seen a lot in his coaching career. How do you think they're going to line up against a different offense that they're going to face any other game this year?
Well, that's the big question. I really don't know what we're going to end up seeing, but they said they've been, all throughout the week, they've talked about how they've been installing a game plan. They feel good about the game plan about it. They think that they have the antidote, and we'll see. Something that Don Brown has been talking about since April. He brought up Air Force right after the spring game. It was the first thing on his mind after that whole scrimmage ended. So it's something that they've been planning for quite some time, and it's really quite difficult, obviously, considering that it's one game. You have to completely change everything you're doing just to be able to defend, one particular team. And like Harbaugh said on Monday, they do a little bit of a mix. They'll go traditional offense and then throw in the triple option and go back to traditional set, and back and forth. So they will see some similar looks, but obviously they're really going to be relying on the linebackers and the safeties to really be, very disciplined. Those corners are really going to have to be in tight man as well. So there's a lot going into being able to defend that and just not being tricked. And being able to be sure in tackling and all of that. Gap coverage is going to be paramount, and not over pursuing from the defensive line. So it's going to definitely be a big challenge, because we already saw last week where getting the ball out quickly could kind of negate what Michigan's defensive line is trying to do. So I'm curious to see with what Air Force brings to the table, because obviously they're going to move very fast in anything that they do. It will be very curious to see how Michigan's able to stop it. I think it's going to be kind of a mystery until we see it on the field, but we've already seen some changes and some willingness to do some different things with the 3-3-5 stack this year. So I'm wondering if part of that was in parcel of preparing for a game like this, where they want to show that they can do a lot of different things.
And we've got the uber-talented Isaiah Hole of 24/7 Sports on this week's edition of Two Bad Hombres, courtesy of some fresh feedback. And you know what? I don't want to geek out here, but you've got some great photographs. And, I love the work that you do. And I saw some photos you took of Grant Perry's touchdown last week, of Lavert Hill's first pick 6 as a college player. And, you do some great work, and wanted to ask you, since I don't know really what the heck I'm talking about when it comes to photographs and really how to produce a great one, what is the art behind taking a stellar photograph?
Well, it's tricky, and you have your good weeks, you have your bad weeks. I tend to get decent pictures even when I have my bad weeks, which means that the majority of the ones that I've taken are unusable because they're out of focus, things like that. There's both an art and kind of a willingness to proverbially stand in the pocket, I guess, because being on the sideline, guys are coming at you, and you have to be willing, decide how long do I stand in here before I have to bail out before getting hit myself. I have a film degree from Michigan, so that kind of informs the way that I want to take pictures. Although it's been a little bit different working for 24/7, because they want everything centered for the sake of what they're going to look like on the front page and in headlines and things like that. So I kind of use a mix between trying to keep things centered as well as trying to give something of a filmic look. So I approach things from just kind of more of a video cinematographer type viewpoint, more so than a photographer. But it's a challenge because you're trying to focus and you're trying to follow the play. A lot of times I feel like I'm probably one of the worst on the sidelines when it comes to following the play for whatever given reason. Like Tyree Kinnell's pick six, I got a picture of him catching the ball, but it was completely out of focus because by the time that I had turned to him actually getting the ball, it was I didn't even know what I was looking at. I'm just kind of randomly trying to focus and get him, but I was able to get him on the return and got some great shots of him running the ball back and him crossing the goal line. So a lot of it is just being able to trust your instincts, to try to be able to move quickly, to trying to be able to frame your shot, keep things in frame the way that you want to. So there's a lot of moving parts. Heck of a lot of fun. It's a good break from all of the writing that I do during the week and that I return to immediately after the game. But it's something I'm still learning, honestly. I started out, I didn't really become a photographer by choice in a way. It kind of happened on accident. I was volunteering for some political campaigns back in 2012, and I bought a camera so I could start doing more video work and do some freelance work that way, since I had some experience, obviously, doing video production from college and everything, and found myself taking some pictures just to kind of help them out, and eventually found myself working for the head of the presidential campaigns and everything like that. So just kind of fell into it somehow, and got out of that because I kind of hate politics. I hate the divisiveness of it, hate how people just, want to, I'm using the word hate, and then I'm going to say I hate how people hate. But, the dream was to be able to do this at a college sports level, and Steve Lorenz had seen some of my work, gave me a call, and asked me to be a part of the team, and that's kind of how things started. So it's been a blessing.
Well, it's awesome that you're living out your dream.
Yeah, can't complain at all, even when I do.
Isaiah, what's in the bag? What gear do you use to take those quality pictures?
I have two Canon 7Ds. The Mark I, being a photographer / beat writer also means I'm still also working on a budget. So got a couple good used ones before the Mark II came out. But so I'm running those. I have a Canon 70 to 200 2.8 L series lens and a Sigma. What is it? It's not a 17 to 40. It's the 24 to 70. But this week I just picked up a Canon 300 millimeter 4L lens as well. So Michigan's been kind of pushing the photographers down towards the end zone with how much action they have on the actual sidelines. So I felt compelled to get a longer lens. So we'll see how we're going to be debuting it this week. So let's see if I can master it quickly, because we're not going to have any warm-up games here.
Well, Isaiah, all that stuff just went over my head completely. But I know you know what you're talking about, and I appreciate all the fresh feedback that you lent to my audience this week on Two Bad Hombres, and I'll see you at the game on Saturday.
All right, excellent, Vito. I look forward to talking to you in the press box after the press conferences.
All right, sounds like a plan.
Time.
Yep, you have a good one.
Feverishly trying to get our stories out.
I know how it is. Well, you have a good one, and I'll talk to you there. And that was Isaiah Hull of 24/7 Sports. He covers Michigan football. He's a team writer for 24/7 Wolverine, and he does photography. And you know what? I think one of the difficulties, too, is trying to figure out how to work one properly, or work one of those cameras that he was talking about with all the meticulous details that he brought up, but also about staying in the pocket almost. Like, I think he brought up that reference as a quarterback has to, but staying in there when you have a receiver or something coming at you, or a defender coming really hard and fast at you, and you got to stay in there to get the photograph. I mean, that's got to be difficult at times, too, I would imagine, Jake.
Oh, yeah, no, you see these photographers, they take hits.
Yeah.
In the Lions game on Sunday, you saw a photographer right behind the goalpost take a 58-yard Matt Prater field goal
To the nuts!
Right to the nuts.
Yeah.
Didn't flinch.
I know,
Didn't
that's
flinch.
impressive.
Unbelievable,
Nice,
but that's why these guys get paid the money they do.
They should get paid the big bucks, and that's one tough dude. I'll just say that. And then, Doc, what do you have to say?
No, it's fascinating, when you got guys that are, dual threats, as you say, writer, photographer.
Yeah.
You got a lot of work to do, and the thoughts that I was having were I would be the guy that would take the best shot ever. I'd be like, yes, this is the one, and then I go to look at it, and it's out of focus. And you're like, oh my gosh. And I've seen at Oakland games where, some writers are going down there. And it's tough to position yourself to get that shot. And exactly, it's not just what you want to do, it's what the website needs and all that kind of stuff. So it's really complicated. And I give guys like Isaiah credit. And it was a very good interview. Good job, Vito.
Well, thank you very much. Jake Hirschman also had a lovely question and actually one about the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, only one about the game, I think, actually. So that was good. Thank you, Jake. I think you'll be around again for another week's edition of Two Bad Hombres or something. So
I'm always welcome to be back.
But really quick, your thoughts on Michigan football so far this season?
Yeah, so far, I think it's been pretty good. Obviously, the game against Florida, we absolutely dominated them. Aside from the 2 pick sixes, we played almost flawlessly. It was a beautiful game. Game against Cincy, a little more rocky, but it was Cincinnati, so we got the win. Can't complain. Got a couple more weeks before we have the big rivalry game against Michigan State, so I'm feeling confident.
Now, isn't the stat that the U of M defense has accounted for 21 points and the offenses they've played against have resulted in 17, have accounted for 17 points? I think it's 21-17 in favor of U of M's defense, outscoring these teams that U of M has faced so far. That's pretty darn impressive. And the defense, which was really, I don't know if you can say ridiculed, but critiqued as being young and inexperienced, especially the secondary, has meshed well so far. And really, Lavert Hill is one of the big-time leaders of that secondary, a sophomore from Detroit King, as Isaiah Hull was talking about. And he had a pick six, the first one of his collegiate career last week against Cincy, and I think he's the real deal, and he's just another PSL, Detroit PSL guy recruited by U of M that's playing at a high level. That is just something else, how U of M now really gets all those top players from the inner city, and that is, in Detroit I'm speaking of.
Yeah, you got to love that. It's a little bit of a flip from a few years ago when Michigan State was kind of on top of their game, taking some of those recruits. Michigan's getting them back, really stepping up. Like you said, the defense was kind of talked about as being very, very young, but they've been playing well. Can't complain. Got a game against Air Force this weekend, a team that really isn't used to putting up a ton of points, so it could be another great showing for the defense. I'm excited.
I think it will be. And you know what? How much do we take from U of M's play on defense so far when you're not playing the greatest teams? Now, Florida, okay, but they had 10 suspended players too, I know. So, but you have to take that into account. A neutral site in Texas, that's a big W. Great way to start up the season. But really, Cincy and now Air Force of the Mountain West, not the greatest offensive attacks, right?
Yeah, they're not the greatest offensive attacks, but it's not like we're playing FCS schools. Cincinnati is a school that has been a top 10 team at some point during the last 15 years. They're a good school, got a good coach, and Florida, it's a top 25 team. They were top 15 when we played them, so I don't think we're playing cupcakes necessarily. We could be scheduling a lot worse teams, and a lot of big schools do. My Miami Hurricanes played Bethune-Cookman their first
game. Who the heck is that, right?
Exactly.
And football, nothing, yeah.
Exactly, and Cincinnati's not a washover. If we didn't show up, they could have beaten us. Florida obviously could have beaten us. And we're playing Air Force, another school who obviously isn't the best, but there are a lot worse teams you could play. This is actually going to be a test for our defense, like we talked about. The triple option, a defense you're not used to seeing.
Jacob, this week, there's been a lot of talk and speculation regarding the quality of Michigan fans. People are kind of exploring and wondering, okay, people are saying Michigan fans aren't happy unless they're unhappy. And people are saying, well, look, Michigan has a super high standard, and when a guy like Wilton Speight doesn't perform, when there's a lot of mistakes, people hold Michigan to a high standard. What's your take on it, and do you believe that, the criticisms of Wilton Speight, the criticisms of the program, and maybe the slight beginning of criticism of Jim Harbaugh are founded, or are they completely outrageous and incorrect?
Since last year, I've kind of been a Speight hater, I guess I could say. It hasn't been that serious, but I haven't been completely sold on him. Rudock got better as the year went on when we had him. Started off against Utah, threw a couple picks, but just got better and better. Speight necessarily hasn't gotten that much better, I think. We've seen these first two games. He's had a handful of overthrows that have obviously been concerning, had those 2 pick sixes against Florida. I think he's good. I agree with what Isaiah said, that he is our best option out there. I don't think O'Korn or Peters is ready to take over his spot. But I think fans are allowed to criticize. If we see stuff that is, frustrating, we can talk about it. That's what sports is. Every fan base loves to criticize stuff. That's just how it is. Even the Patriots fans are criticizing their team after that week 1 performance against the Chiefs. I think we'll be okay. I still think Speight's a good enough quarterback. Like I said, we only have a few games he really has to play well in this year. Michigan State, Penn State, and then at the end against Wisconsin and Ohio State. So he's got a lot of games where he can work on the stuff. Isaiah said his footwork, most importantly, I think, is something that he really needs to get down. Works on that footwork. Works on, not overthrowing guys as much, and he can be a serviceable quarterback. He's been, this is his second year starting now, so you really have to be, I think, okay with what we have, because there's a lot worse situations, kind of like the Lions, and to have a quarterback in college who is now in his second year, who might stay for his third year, it's hard to get that in college.
I think the concern, too, with Spate is that he became worse off as the season progressed last year, where Rudock, as you noted, got better as that season progressed in 2015. Last year, Wilton Spate's production tailed off at the end of the season, specifically against Iowa. I would say in that game on the road, he wasn't very good against Iowa. And there were some other notable performances where he wasn't standoutish enough to get it done for U of M down the stretch last year. So Rudock proved to be the opposite of that. And now in year 3 for Harbaugh, when you really want to see U of M beat Ohio State at this point after losing the first 2 times under Harbaugh, Spate has to really be stellar, I think, down the stretch too, and for that to even occur, for them to beat Ohio State, who I know just lost to Oklahoma, has already a loss with that being said, but that was Oklahoma, and Ohio State still has more talent. So I think Harbaugh just has to get it done this year against Ohio State.
Yeah.
And do you think the same about that?
I mean, like I said, Harbaugh's in no danger of losing his job, but really it comes down to Ohio State. Every year, Michigan, bottom line, has to play a Big Ten championship before the Big Ten championship, because we have to play Ohio State, and then we have to win that just to play a team like Wisconsin. Like we've touched on for basically the past 5 minutes, a lot of it comes down to Spate. By that time, he will have basically started for 2 full years, aside from his brief injury. And that's just something that not a lot of college programs have. Not a lot of programs are starting the same player over and over. Good guys usually leave. And if Spate shows up and beats Ohio State, there's a chance he could get drafted. But if not, he could just kind of go into the quarterback abyss that is every other quarterback who's just okay.
Like a John Navarre.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? There we go. And now, I think if Brandon Peters was ready to play, they might turn to him at some point this season, but I don't think they will. And because John O'Korn really isn't a sexy option either, I think Spate keeps his job the rest of the year, unless they go on a losing streak here.
I'd be shocked if Spate lost his job. Harbaugh has unequivocally over and over again said Spate's my guy. Like I said, he's a guy who could be our quarterback for a couple of years, so I don't see a reason, especially to go to O'Korn, who's gone after this year. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense.
No, I don't think he's going to lose his job this year, Wilton Spate, that is. And Doc, with that being said, thank you for looking so lovely in the studio this week.
Always, Vito. When you're around and you bring the VIP guests, I got to look good. But all in all, though, I really enjoyed the conversation, man. You're bringing in good guests, and I really want to give you credit for the week that you had in terms of the sit-down podcast that you did, the work that you're doing in terms of the Top Cat poll that's now showing up on our website. You basically have done a lot of good work in terms of getting us some hits, too. So it's all good, brother. Thank you.
No problem. I'm trying to do that for the podcast network, trying to help the podcast network out, because the podcast network helps me out, and hopefully you enjoyed yourself as well this week, being on the podcast, Jake.
Always. Love being here.
Well, thank you. Safe travels back to Florida, all right? Best of luck the rest of the semester, too, at Miami, Florida, in the law school.
Thank you.
All right?
Appreciate it.
And when you're partying in Miami, look, hit that live button. Let us see, man. It's all good. When it gets a little bit outrageous, turn it off, and then send up some love. We want to see what's going on, because, look, we're toiling away here in Michigan now. Going into the fall, it's going to be cold as hell, and you'll be, you know what? Is your how many bedrooms does your apartment got?
I only have one, but
we can't crash there, Doug. I know you were thinking of that. Now we can't.
It's all good. But hey, listen, if we're in Miami, I'm just going to invite myself over to you.
Hey, yeah, please do.
But he's got a family at home. Okay, some more important priorities to take care of.
Yeah, see, I know I can just throw Vito's name around and people will know what's up. So
obviously, because I've been there. And with that being said, safe travels once again. Enjoyed having you on this week, and best of luck to you. And thanks to everybody else out there for tuning in to this week's edition of Two Bad Hombres. Adios.
Head spin, get fly. I got 6 jobs. I don't care. I don't care.